Long lineups for motorists entering Canada from the US should now be a thing of the past, as the federal government has removed the requirement for all entering the country to use the ArriveCAN app. The Greater Niagara Chamber of Commerce was one of the voices calling for a relaxing of the border demands. Hugo Chesshire joins us now. Hugo, a little late for the peak of the 2022 tourism season, but good news for you nonetheless.
Yes, certainly better late than never. And I think, as they say, the best time to make the ArriveCAN app optional is before the tourist season, and the second best time is now. So now is good. I'll take now. And unfortunately, we have missed 2022, but it does bode well for a better 2023 season for sure.
You weren't the only chamber advocating for this. This was happening across the province as well, was it not?
It was, yes. This affected border communities all across the country because it was a federal mandate. And so we had put together a coalition of border communities all the way from Victoria and British Columbia out to Edmundston in New Brunswick. Hopefully that's right. And we'd all basically lobbied local MPs and border communities, talked to ministers, just trying to be another voice that was trying to relax this for our tourism members and to help that cross-flow border traffic.
Throughout this pandemic, our government has been focused on the advice of our public health experts, of doctors.
Why do you think it took so long for the feds to make the change?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think they had plans. They probably still do have plans for the ArriveCAN app. And I think when you look at that, that's probably the way things are going to go in the future, because obviously having an app on the phone, having it be digital is theoretically a lot more seamless, a lot smoother an experience than filling out a paper form when you come in. So I think they were really keen to use this as an opportunity to develop that app and get people used to it. Unfortunately, with it being mandatory, that posed a lot of problems because obviously it's well known in Canada. If you're international traveling in Canada, you know what ArriveCAN is. You know you've got to have your ducks in a line before you come back to the border.
But not everybody coming into Canada from another country would know about it.
Exactly, yeah. So the Americans, the border community crossing points had reported that the Americans really don't know what ArriveCAN is. So when you're an American tourist, you show up at the border and the border guard says, okay, can I see your ArriveCAN app? And the American says, okay, what's ArriveCAN?
And then they have to download it right there.
Exactly. You have to pay $2,000 for their international roaming data or whatever it is to download the app. And then the border guard probably has to give them some impromptu tech support to get it all working, which slows the entire thing down. Plus, something like 39% of Americans aged over 65 don't have a smartphone at all. So what do you do when you show up at the border and you don't have a smartphone? So I think having it optional is the right choice, because for those who do have a smartphone and are comfortable with the technology, it can be a way to expedite that border crossing. It was the mandatory aspect that was really slowing things down. And so having the paper option available for those who don't have a smartphone, aren't comfortable with the technology, that's the way to go. And I think that's going to be the way to go for some years until this becomes more accepted.
There's also been a relaxing of some of the vaccine mandates since October began. Has that been relaxed at the border?
Yes, so I think relaxing the vaccine mandates, we're actually one of the last countries, I think, to still have vaccine mandates in place. And the trouble was they made sense initially, but as the pandemic wore on, they became less and less relevant because the mandate was just that you have to have 2 shots. And if you got your first shot and your booster shot when they first became available, by now, if you haven't got your 3rd or your 4th shots, you're not actually that much better off than someone who's unvaccinated. So it doesn't actually anymore, because it doesn't cover those 3rd and 4th shots, doesn't really do much in terms of vaccination. So that was another point that was raised of it as well, is like 2 shots was good then, but now this is no longer like up to date medically.
What does this all mean for the tourism industry in the Niagara region?
Well, obviously it's good, and we talked to a lot of tourism businesses who had said that even though things are back open and when everything in Ontario is open again, which it is, apart from long-term care homes and medical settings, you can pretty much go anywhere, do anything. But the flow of American tourists had really slowed to a trickle. And they were reporting like we're doing 1/10 the amount of business for Americans that we were. So having that border open again, having the Americans being able to come across is going to be huge for the tourism, especially next year, because the further someone comes from, the more they spend, the longer they stay. Those tourists from elsewhere in Ontario, those are great, but they don't tend to stay overnight. They don't tend to see as many attractions. But if you're coming from the States, if you're coming from overseas, and you're in Niagara Falls, you want to see it all. So you're going to get a hotel, you're going to eat out every meal, you're going to see all the attractions. So from a tourism spending perspective, it's much better to have international travelers.
Have they been able to have the federal government been able to get the message across to Americans that there are fewer demands at the border now?
I hope so. Certainly there wasn't a great job communicating to Americans that they had to have the ArriveCAN app, but hopefully those Americans who are unaware that there is a special requirement are now correct in that assumption. So that is boosted there as well. We did actually have considerable support from the American side of the border in this actually, which was a little bit amusing to me because personally, this is possibly a little selfish, or would be if I was American, but I would think if Canadians want to keep American
Yeah, they're
tourists
going to
out,
shop in Niagara Falls, New York, or Buffalo, right?
exactly, like that. Let them go ahead. If they want to hamstring their tourism industry and give a boost to ours, then go ahead. But I think the American politicians are more savvy and realize that we grow better together. And so they were also calling for this to be relaxed at the same time.
Some great news. Hugo, thank you for joining us. We'll see you on election night here at your TV.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks very much.